Now, Sam Sedar got absolutely demolished by a debate me bro. And it makes a lot of sense because for the last decade or so, the left isolated themselves in a bubble. They were no platform for bigots, no platform for fascists. And bigots and fascists was literally everyone under the sun that disagreed with any of their policies. And so they didn't have debates. And when they're having debates, they're falling for like the cheapest debate me bro trick. So let's watch and analyze how Mr. Sam is doing.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Okay, so I would like to touch on the religious fundamentalist aspect.
You know what I hate about this? Is that we get to see political commentators doing this, but we don't actually get to see real politicians doing this. Like, wouldn't it be nice to actually see AOC and Ted Cruz have a debate? You know, like with stuff that actually matters? We used to have this in Romania. They used to last for 5 hours, where you would have a talk show with leaders from every major political party, and they would take place at around 10 p.m. all the way up until 2 a.m. And the reason for it is that you wanted the politicians to be under pressure. You wanted for them to get tired so that they start saying dumb stuff. And what you notice is that no politician had the answer, and you notice that at least they're being honest. And so, like, the politician that managed to keep his cool, the politician that had flaws and wasn't perfect, but at least was closer to the thing you wanted, that was the one that people would vote for. And that is like the most beautiful thing, is to understand that no system is perfect and no human being is perfect. If people demand perfection from their politicians, you will get politicians that lie to you, that manipulate you, and that hide the truth from you. Whether if you admit that some corruption is acceptable, you realize that, okay, well, corruption is part of human nature, some is acceptable, this is the level that I'm willing to put up with, everything above this is not, and then you can actually have a normal conversation. I actually miss those times. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Are you an atheist?
I'm a Reformed Jew. I don't have a strong belief in the existence of God, but I don't think that religion in and of itself is bad.
Okay, so what's wrong with religious fundamentalists? So, like, when you said trans rights and women's rights or something like that?
Well, the problem I have with religious fundamentalists, and really more, I guess, it's really theocrats,
Okay.
is that they want to impose their morality that comes from their religion on the rest of us. And
So, he is absolutely articulating the very essence, the very source of the major conflict that keeps happening in the Anglosphere. And I noted this sitting from outside the Anglosphere. Like, I can tell you this while looking from the outside in. And this is happening every single generation within the Anglosphere, and it will keep happening. I don't think it can stop. There are other nations in the world that don't have to deal with this problem. But for some reason, I think that maybe it's the Protestant mindset that is the sole reason for a lot of these cultural clashes. So, every single generation, you have a group of people that believe they have the solution to fix the world. And in order to fix the world, they have an ideology. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be an offshoot of Christianity, can be woke, can be whatever. But their idea is that if they can force every single member of society, every single person, to adhere to their world of view, to their ideology, then they will reach a golden era. Right? So usually the generation is dissatisfied with the past, and they will say that the reason the past is bad is because there were individuals that didn't think like us. But if we get everybody, every single person in society to think like us, then we're going to have a utopia. Now, the essence is on think, right? It's not about the actions that people do. It's not about the behavior that people do. It's like, no, we need to make sure that people think exactly what we tell them to think. They raise their children exactly the way that we tell them to think and raise them. And only that is the way that we're going to accomplish the best society. Now, when I was born, it started with the moral majority, which I think was an answer to the hippie movement. I may be wrong because I didn't live those ages, didn't really study that time period. But the moral majority was literally that. Like, we need to get every single person in society to do the things that we tell them to do. And so it is unacceptable for people to like heavy metal music. It is unacceptable for people to play Dungeons and Dragons. It is unacceptable for people to watch slasher films. It is unacceptable for people to play video games. Like, just constant bickering, constant catechism, right? Like, just unable to mind their own business. Their business had to be your business. And what ends up happening when you behave like this, when you're nagging, like what is the answer when you're going to the workplace and you have a person that's not connected to you by blood, is not in a relationship with you, but they constantly just nonstop nag. They nag and they nag and they nag. Well, what ends up happening is that the rest of the workplace eventually forms a group and it's against that person. They want to see that person suffering, because when you're hostile to people, especially when you're hostile to strangers, because this is the way they propagate their ideology, through hostility. Hostility builds resentment. Hostility builds spite. And then those people are going to do anything in their power. They're going to devote their energy to make you suffer, even if it destroys society, even if it destroys everything around them. The perfect example is the banning of TikTok, where individuals went and they signed themselves up for the China app. And the moral busybodies just couldn't understand, like, what is going on? Are they idiots? No, they just despise you. They hate your fucking guts. And they're willing to suffer just to drive a point, just to annoy you, just to antagonize you. They're willing to even hurt themselves just so that you can suffer, because they have no other way of driving their point. Like, they're desperate. You push them in a corner and like a wounded animal, they're lashing out at you. And so this is what happened during the Obama era. You had people becoming atheists in order to spite the moral majority. They decoupled morally from the previous people. They're like, you know what? If religion is the way you're behaving, then we're going to reject it altogether. Like, everything you believe in, we now hate. Everything you do, we now despise. And so it led to people like Sam Sedar. The problem is that, again, the Protestant seed, the morality that you need to force society to behave like you, is still in the generation. And so they were like, we are terrified by the religious majority. We don't want them to come back. What we need to do is we need to force everybody to think like us. We need to do everything possible in order to force everyone to think like us, to keep the moral majority at bay. And this is where you get the woke movement. And everyone needs to be on board with LGBT issues. Everyone needs to be on board with representation. Everyone needs to be on board with feminism. Because if a single person is not on board, the moral majority can come back. And so their behavior caused the new generation to build spite, resentment. Their hostility is what brought the MAGA movement. And you have Trump today, which is a response to the woke, right? Like now Trump administration has all but openly declared war on the woke ideology. And I'm pretty sure that now certain extreme elements from the Zoomers, they're probably going to go like, if we get everyone to think like us, if we get everyone to behave the way we want them to behave, then it's going to keep the woke at bay, because otherwise the woke will come back. So in order to protect you from the woke, we need to force people, every single member of society, to behave in our way. And it's a cycle. I don't think it can be stopped. I don't think that anything can prevent it. I just think that is the way America and probably Britain as well, Australia, I think like this is the way they function. This is the way these countries operate. And there's no stopping it. It's just like understanding that while the guard is changing, you know, from the left to the right culture, there's a time period where you have like some creativity, some entertainment, some freedom, without being suffocated by the nagging, until it all kicks back in again. And it's so interesting because Sam Sedar doesn't understand what he's doing. He doesn't see the problem. And this other person doesn't see the problem either. Like they're both not understanding that the issue is the thought policing. That is the main issue. You know, judge people by their actions, not by the way they think. And stop trying to nag at strangers. It doesn't fucking work. What you need to do is to get yourself in order, get your family in order, and if you have like a legit wholesome life, then other people will look at you and they will want to emulate you. When you have a person that's actually happy and they're enjoying life and they have kids and everything is good, people want to be like that. They will ask, like, what is your way? Like, how did you manage to get to this point? And then you can tell them, well, religion, I met Jesus. And that's the way I am. I follow Jesus. There are religious countries in the world that lack the canonism. Like, as long as someone doesn't fuck with me or my family, I leave them the fuck alone. Because I expect the same thing. Every person wants to have fun. And this is something that at the end of this discussion was mentioned. It's like, well, liberals only want to feel good, and that's it. And the reality is, like, everyone wants to feel good. Right? Like, if you promote an ideology of pain and suffering, that is like appealing to some people. Like environmentalism, for instance, is an ideology that just fuels pain and suffering, right? Like forever in perpetuity, like staying home, eat the bugs, blah, blah, blah. There are offshoots of Christianity that are based like that. It's just like, the body is sinful, the spirit is pure, lash yourself. Like it used to be in medieval time, like extreme outshots of that. And they are appealing to some people. But they're not going to be appealing to the general public. And if you try to force that onto the general public, you're going to realize that you're outnumbered 100 to 1. And then you're going to go Pikachu face where your entire ideology is being attacked from all sides by people that have had enough with your shit. Because at the end of the day, you would behave like that as well if someone did that to you. Which is why exactly people rose up against the woke ideology. Like, in the beginning, a lot of people had nothing against woke ideology. Well, they're doing their thing. But until it got into their lives, it gets into sports, it gets into video games, it gets into entertainment, it gets in the news, it gets at the workplace, it gets into the schools, and people are like, enough. Even if they were to agree with the message, enough. And so this is the problem, right? Like, it's the thought policing. Like, you need to indoctrinate every single person in your ideology. Why? Why does every single person need to be indoctrinated in your ideology? And if you want to do that, Christianity isn't the answer, it's Islam. It's much better suited for that. Like, it's a religion literally designed to achieve that. Christianity is more about self-improvement, which is why you should care about yourself and your family. And if you have like a genuine positive relation with God, and you have a wholesome life, other people will want to be like you. Now, another interesting aspect is the idea that you need to force people to make the right decisions. And you need to force people to live a virtuous life. And this is where both the woke and the moral majority failed. Because the reality is, everything that's fun is either on some level immoral, unhealthy, or illegal. Like, for instance, driving a car at 300 miles an hour. It's both unhealthy and illegal. And immoral. But it's fun. And so, like, you need to understand that what's fun for some people is not fun for others. What's pleasurable for some people is not pleasurable for others. The problem with the woke, as well as the problem with the moral majority, is that they operate on the idea of sola scriptura. The woke don't have religion, but they have, like, their own interpretation of critical theory that comes from the academia. And they also go to pick and choose. Like, if you talk with a woke person, you will notice that it's just like sola scriptura. They pick and choose what they like, and they discard the rest, right? And so the idea is that there is no tradition, there's no ritual, there's nothing that, okay, this worked up until now, let's keep it because it's working, it's not destroying society, we can keep this. They don't do that at all, right? And so you end up with the person that's interpreting the message to interpret in a way that makes them feel good. And to interpret it in a way based on current events. And so what ends up happening is that you will have like all these people that have their own vices. Like, for instance, a person can gamble, but they can be extremely against alcohol. And they use religion to justify why prohibition is important while they gamble, or maybe they cheat on their wife, right? But they don't view their own problems as being fundamental. They just view drinking as being fundamental because drinking is not something that they have. And by condemning others, by demeaning others, it distracts away from their vices. And this is like one of the most disgusting types of behavior. Like, nothing gives a bigger sting to a movement than having people like this in charge. And usually when it's found out that they're violating their own morality, the people around them ignore it, and it makes the movement even more stinky. It makes the movement even more disgusting. And so, I think that in a perfect society, everything needs to be allowed with moderation. You don't allow excesses, but you allow release valves. Like, for instance, you don't ban gambling. There are, like, a lot of easy points to score with gambling. Right? Like anyone can condemn gambling. A lot of people who don't gamble have no reason to defend gambling, right? Gambling is evil. It destroys families, it destroys homes. There's no reason to have it, right? But what if you just regulate it? Make sure that kids don't gamble. Let's not have animal fights as gambling. Let's make this and this and that. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's immoral to lock people up for playing dices. To put people in prison just because they played some dice. That's not a good society. And even then, if you do that, you're going to build resentment. You're going to have people that had a brother, a son, or someone else that was put in prison because he played dices. They're not going to rationalize it and view it the way you do it. And then they're going to organize and fuck with your movement. Right? So, like, don't allow the excesses. Like, let's not allow gambling houses to operate wherever and whenever without any regulation, to allow kids to gamble, so on and so forth. But it should still be an option for people that want to gamble. Alcohol, for instance, right? Like, the Americans tried the excess to ban alcoholism. Well, it ended up with the mafia managing to take a huge chunk. People were still drinking. People went to prison for drinking. Like, imagine this. Imagine going to prison for drinking a beer. Isn't that fucking mental? Isn't that fucking insane? You know, like someone's son or someone's brother or someone's husband went to prison because they had a glass of whiskey. It's fucking insane, right? And so, like, what do you do? Well, you say that kids aren't allowed to drink. If you want to drink, you have to be over 18. So, like, you make a compromise. This is how a well society functions. But by finding a middle ground, that's acceptable. Like, you need to understand some corruption is okay. And you, as a Christian, you need to stay away from the vices. Keep your family away from the vices and let other people do their shit. You know, if you see a neighbor that's gambling, you can tell him, it's like, hey, do you need any help? Like, can you not stop? And if they don't want to stop, leave them the fuck alone. They're not your father. They're not your husband, right? Like, you tried helping, but, like, if you try to force them, you're not fixing the problem. Because the problem is in their heart. The problem is that until they realize that it's bad, they will keep doing it. And if you try to stop them, they will hate and despise you. And you probably won't stop them either. The best thing you can do is to make it illegal for them to do it, and then they'll end up in prison. And they will hate you. And his family will hate you even more. And so I think this is the conversation that Sam Sedar didn't manage to have. I'll probably play the rest of it in my live stream. He basically fell for all the debate me bro tactics. But I feel like two people that are in essence having the same behavior. The idea of policing every single person's mind in society, right? Like making sure that if you get every single person to think the way you do, you're going to have a good society. The reality is, you're just setting yourself up for the next revolution. Let me know what you guys think, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.